Welcome back to Beyond the Comet podcast, where we talk about the magic and the mystery of the future. My name is Ahmed, and I'm here with Cody. And today we're going to be talking about the future of language. Specifically, when does our language get updated? Cody, I know you have a lot of thoughts about this. When do you think our language gets updated, and where do we go from here?
I actually think it's coming pretty soon. The reason why we started to talk about this subject matter was because I got a article in my news feed about a new process that is non-invasive and uses an fMRI to record your brain activity. Well, I think the patients are listening to podcasts. I think it's like a couple hours of podcast. And what they're able to do is they're able to track the neural, reactivity and map it to language, and not even just language, but just like ideas in general. So it can actually take the imagery that is being elicited by your brain while this activity is happening, and come up with kind of a representation, a language representation that fits that model, which is really, really cool. I mean,
Yeah.
because we've seen a lot of this stuff. The pig with the Elon Musk, what is it? Neuralink, yeah, Neuralink.
Yeah.
The Neuralink process, but no one, I don't think, really wants to cut a hole in their head to get this. Other than if you need it for a prosthesis, if you have disabilities that you're hopefully trying to overcome. But this being non-invasive just seems like a really big step into a future that I've seen only represented in media. And specifically, there's a book that I am going to reference here because I think it is the most clear and perfect example of where we're headed. It's by John Scalzi. It's Old Man's War. It's by far an amazing book. If anyone has the opportunity to read or listen to it, please do. But in this book, the gist is, in this book, they have something called a brain pal that's inside of your head. I don't know. They don't really get into the gist. I think it is installed, so it's more of a surgical and invasive process. But once this is installed, now you can communicate through thought, with other individuals around you, along with a host of other stuff that's, it's also an AI that, helps you throughout your day, and basically like reminders, and it's a personal assistant that continually helps you out throughout the day.
So Google in your head, basically.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I definitely see this kind of coming as a transfer into the way that we communicate as both like individuals and as groups and as societies. The crazy part about this in the book, because they go really in depth, and they go, you basically join into groups. So like, as you can join into your, like, because the whole thing is it's a military based novel. So in the future, but so they have to interface with their team, and they can hear all the chatter that's happening on their team. But it is really difficult for the new people that have just entered into this kind of futuristic interface to handle the amount of communication that's happening all at once.
Right.
But there are also examples in the book where people who have had it their whole lives, because these are, it's I'm not going to explain the whole book, but basically there's two groups. There's those that have had it their whole lives, and the way that they interact with it is so quick that even the people that have the interface introduced to them later in life, they cannot even communicate with the people that have had it their whole life because of the amount of speed and efficiency that they can communicate ideas and thoughts across an entire group. And when you look at it this way, and you kind of look back at how this is also true in our own language, the way that, people are now, if you take, your parents or your grandparents and stuff, and you try to express communication that has come up, like even memes, like, how much information can be packed into just a simple image with text, and it can elicit, huge ideas, and huge understandings across vast amounts of people. They didn't even have that, so it's like, it's not so much that this is a jump into a new evolution. This is just a continuation of an evolution that's been going on in language our entire existence.
Right.
We're just more efficient, in the use of language.
What's interesting is typically when we think of efficiency in language, I think people think of positives. Like it streamlines how many words you need to say something. For example, with your meme example, you can just show someone a picture of something and then that conveys a whole bunch of understanding, shared history. It was supposed to be humorous. All of these things you can pack into one image. Where if you don't have that background, it doesn't hit. It doesn't really mean anything. And I think as the efficiency increases, that's only going to happen more where the people in the know, for example, our generation or younger generations who are in the know with whatever technology, there's going to be a bigger gulf between them and those who are in previous generations who don't have exposure to a lot of the same technologies, a lot of the same cultural references, and that language will kind of separate from them.
Yeah, and I find this all the time when you speak to younger crowds, I've had a lot of experience with this in the meme world.
Hmm.
It's like you had to. I can't do it. I cannot, like, because they know meme references for like the last 10 years, and it's not even like just some of them. It's like
Hmm.
all of them, and how the history of the memes have unfolded throughout this whenever it started.
Yeah.
um it's impossible to even, like, if you weren't basically a kid that thought that was amazing at the time, it's really difficult to come around and try to learn it from the entire history after the fact,
Yeah, it's
and
not a history book type thing where you just read the facts and figure it out because I think the context changes over time. Like a meme that was supposed to be funny before can mean something else now, and like layers of memes on top of each other. It's very much experiential. I don't think it's something you read in a textbook.
well, yeah, and then one gets deep fried, and then it's
Hmm.
like then it's changed, and then people mess with the words that are on the to make them a little different, and then
Right.
it's like, yeah, it's crazy. It's like they
Hmm.
have each meme has its own like historical life. Like you could probably create a YouTube channel and I'm sure there is, but just based off
Right.
of the history of each meme, and you could take a meme and show the evolution of that meme throughout its life, and it's just it's crazy that these are compressed ideas, and they're not
Hmm.
even compressed ideas. They're like almost emotional feelings of what is humorous and what is actionary in our society. And it's like if you're coming too late, it's like you miss it. You don't even understand what the hell's going on.
Well, it's kind of I like the phrase that history doesn't repeat, but it rhymes. And it's not too different than every generation, which has its own words, it has its own sayings or kind of ways of communicating that the older generations don't get and they see as, shocking or different. And they see all the problems with it that, oh, this isn't the true language. But I think it's, as you're saying, it's evolution. As time goes on, we keep getting more efficient, or maybe not even efficient, but just things become more comfortable for people to communicate with in each generation. And it's true, it can be either inclusive or exclusive. It can push people out who aren't with the language. But for those who get memes, who get the new lingo, they can keep up with each other better and kind of feel tighter because of that.
Yeah, and it's when I was doing a little bit of research on for this episode, I looked up acronyms. I was like, when did this start? When did
Hmm.
now I think we're inundated, like we're so many acronyms all the time. It's almost insane how many acronyms. And I mean, we even joked about it in a previous episode
Hmm.
with SETI being there's two SETIs,
Right, right.
and they're spelled exactly the same. It's like,
Hmm.
the fact that there's so many different people that want to use acronyms that we can't even have a unique space
Hmm.
anymore. But the first acronym that I could find was only, the late 1800s.
Wow.
And I was like, really? Like nobody
Yeah,
used
that's hard to
acronyms
believe.
before that?
Hmm.
And it just shows like how that compresses an idea. It's like a shorthand, and it's a shorthand in language. But I actually found this a lot when I was in school. There's so many shorthands to convey ideas,
Hmm.
in higher level concepts that it's so that the information just keeps getting compressed, and
Hmm.
then the teacher just will explain to you once and then use that compressed representation of that information and then just use that, so that it's almost like you're continually compressing information over and over again
Yeah.
until you can get this shorthand. And you see this in a lot of industries now, but I don't feel like this necessarily is something that was as compressed like earlier on. Like I don't
Mhm.
think if you were to go and speak with people in the 18th century or the 17th century, the same amount of compression that we are used to today would exist. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, and I
No,
also actually like it's kind of sorry to keep going, but
that's okay.
uh, where I also find it interesting is in like Shakespearean speech, how
Mhm.
many words they use that are unnecessary today that we've found that don't really communicate anything, but they're more about style. They're stylistic
Mhm.
words and and we've boiled down language into such a precise, element of communication.
Right.
And it's just crazy. It's like it's
Yeah.
really interesting.
What's interesting to me is I've leaned towards the efficiency aspect of it, like, "Alright, just get your thoughts across, like, I need to do this." And it always, especially as a kid learning, learning about Shakespeare and reading some of the plays, it seemed like, "Alright, get to the point. Like, what is the point? Why so many extra words?" But then you realize there's kind of a loss of that style and a loss of the art of speech and kind of the nuance in what you say. Because it's not just like, I want to get dinner with you. Someone might say it in like a romantic way or a friendly way, or, be expecting a certain conversation by saying what they say. And I think a lot of that gets lost the more we move towards acronyms and more efficient thought, where this is an extreme, but at a certain point, is it just going to be like computer code where it's like, I expect this. If I get this, then I will receive this, Like, is that how we're going to start communicating with each other?
I think that it really comes down to the speed of the transfer of information. I don't know. I think we're getting to the cusp, and this is what we're going to talk about in the second part. Is we're getting to the cusp where communication itself is going to have to change because it's too slow to accommodate the increased speed of transfer of information.
Mhm.
But you can even see this through just one generation or gap between people. Like this whole thing where words were being shortened and combined
Mhm.
and like people weren't even using full words anymore, and it bugs me. I feel the same way, like we're losing something, we're losing an elegance
Yeah.
of, but regardless it's happening. And if you talk to somebody from that generation, they don't feel that way. They feel
Agreed.
like that's normal because they're indoctrinated into this moment of communication that they will kind of take on, but then they're going to look back to somebody who's shorting it even more,
Yeah.
and
I
they're going to
mean,
be like, well, that's weird. I don't
look at
like that.
look at our
I'm losing.
situation, because
Yeah,
we
sorry.
when's the last time you wrote a letter? Like an
Oh
actual
yeah.
letter to someone? And that seems like, why am I gonna take up that much time to send someone a message? And we got used to email and then text and, quickly sending someone a sentence basically back and forth. Very logically, someone, our parents or grandparents could say, like, "That's so inelegant. That's so, like, rough to just say a quick sentence instead of sitting down and writing a full letter." But we obviously that feels normal for us, and I think it's just a normal transition that we're moving towards more and more efficiency. But I think just to play up again what we're talking about in the next part is the efficiency is coming, and then it really calls into question, like, are these words that we're creating with our mouth or writing down with our hand or typing into a phone, is that fast enough to keep up? And I don't know that it is.
Well, it's super interesting that we're going back to imagery,
Mhm.
with the memes and just I feel like the way that, because I think language is now becoming, it's almost like when we were painting on wall, like as cavemen, we were
Mhm.
using imagery because we didn't have the language to convey it because it wasn't strong enough. And then we found language and that was so much more efficient. But now we're moving so fast, language is not efficient enough. And we're going back to imagery and we're going back to this idea of just conveying ideas, like if I
Mhm.
can transfer exactly what I feel, think, and know to you or a group of people, it is going to be highly more efficient than any communication that you can try to use with your own voice.
Right. No, that's for sure. And it's kind of, like, you can anticipate, okay, shorter and shorter, text messages or a little more abbreviated words. So, I can see that. But when you're talking about basically it's not even like I say something, you say something, but it's just like an ongoing conversation that you can have with someone. Like basically, not to use neural link, but you're basically connecting with someone else's thought process and just exchanging your own imagination, your own dreams, your own visions at the same time they are. And I don't know, I have a hard time visualizing what that's going to be like.
Yeah, it's recommend this book.
Mhm.
By far, it is an amazing representation of, I think, what we're gonna get into,
Mhm.
and, the one thing that there's 2 elements that I've kind of recognized while we've been talking is, one, as we've shortened the communication and lost basically the elegance of communication, we're also losing the emotional and connective
Mhm.
part of communication, because without it's funny, we're now using emojis to and I think that's more just because there's no tone in text, so we
Mhm.
have to use emojis. But um I do think that, with shorter communications and with the speed at which we're trying to elevate to, it does reduce the amount of feeling that comes out of it, the unique words that try to convey,
Yeah.
whatever they're trying to say.
Yeah. I mean, it's
But
not
I
efficient.
oh
Emotions
yeah,
aren't efficient, right? I mean, at the end of the day, it's getting your point across is more important than getting your emotions across. So, if you're choosing efficiency, I don't think you can have it's like kind of a continuum. You can't have both. You have to decide the balance that you accept.
maybe. I
Mhm.
mean, that's where we are now, and maybe that's why
Yeah.
these neural interfaces will be uplifting. Like, I'm an always a positive person, in all these situations. So,
Mhm.
how I think it is because the one thing that this person to person interaction without voice, through thoughts, is emotions are just a copy. We're just using our voice to explain what is going on in our brain, because
Right.
the emotions are effectively just neurons being fired in our brain. So if you can find a accurate copy of that emotion, and you can then also convey not only the idea but exactly how the person is feeling, exactly the emotional context,
Mhm.
we might actually have more efficiency in emotional communication than we've ever had, which is
That's true.
crazy.
Yeah, and I
You
guess
know?
my and this is what I'm still having trouble getting past is I'm still thinking of current communication, and even if I extrapolate, I don't know, 10, 20, 30 years, but that's not what this kind of neural connection is. It's a deeper thing. It's not just I have a list of plans for the weekend. I'm going to send them to your brain. You're going to know how I feel about each activity that we're doing. You're going to know, you know, in general how interested I am in hanging out or not. You're going to feel those things. And I think it's talk about growing pains. That's going to be a difficult process for people to accept that even to the aspect of how much do you want to share? Like for some reasons, for some things I might want to share fully and let everyone know specifically how I feel about it. But I'm sure there's plenty of situations where you want to play that back or maybe express that you're interested but you're not really interested, you know?
Unless you're indoctrinated into the system.
Yeah,
And that's
and I
that's
guess
the
this
whole
goes back to
thing.
your book, yeah.
Well, that is exactly how it's going to be. The way you feel is
Mhm,
going to be for those that are first adapters, that kind of grew into this, or aged into this technology,
right,
rather than grew up with it.
mhm,
And I think that, we will want to have this freedom of thought. But on the other side, I think people that will be born into this will have the opposite effect, where if they aren't connected all the time, feeling other people around them all the time, they're going to feel cut off and alone.
yeah, and that's the interesting nature of any group. The more tight that group is, the worse it feels to be outside of that group, and the more polarizing it can be to be either shunned or forced out of the group because it's such a
So we had a little technical issue there. If you can just sum up what you said in the beginning of,
yeah, no, I
yeah.
was gonna say that it's the more you have a group that's tight and connected, the tougher it is for a person when they're excluded from the group. I think the more they rely on that group for their self-worth, for communication, for their happiness, the tougher it is when they are kicked out. And I think it's only going to increase more when people have more they can share, more they can connect with.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And there is this element though of basically if you are now naked to this group,
Mhm.
because if everything is being shared and you can't really hide anything, fully transparent of what you're thinking and feeling at all times, I think the group itself will kind of help struggling individuals identify those things, because the group itself has a standard that, and this works without brain interfaces, but
Mhm.
often, this drives somebody away. I don't know, because like again, it could drive somebody outside of the group, but at least it's identified early, and maybe those people can be helped. Yeah,
But
there's going to be a lot of side processes that I don't know.
yeah,
Hopefully,
and it just shifts how we think about language in general because I know from, I grew up with I learned a different language. I learned Tamil as my first language and then picked up English. So I've seen how language can be used to insulate people and also connect people. And it's going to change it a lot because people use language if they want to have a private conversation and they don't want everyone else to hear. They use language to, show that they understand someone and then bring them into their group. Like, oh, I speak a little of your language, I can be friendly to you. All of a sudden, if it's instantaneous and you can just connect with people, I do kind of subscribe to your rosier outlook where people can just share. They can be vulnerable because there isn't that structure of, I need to keep you out because you're not part of my language or part of my group. If you start thinking like we can all, and it sounds very rosy, but it's very true. If we can all communicate, there isn't a limit to the person that you can share ideas with. And potentially that could be a great thing. I do have my concerns, but potentially that could be a great thing.
yeah, no, I definitely agree. I think that it it does language defines us so well, like what our society is. I mean, there's always that thing that certain languages have this many words for this kind of concept, because
Mhm.
just historically that's how the language was constructed. But then it also kind of self-defines that community, because there's so many words that are of this concept, but not enough words of this concept.
Right.
um where, yeah, if there's this, because all of the stuff still exists on equal grounds. But if it's just basically emotion and concept and
Mhm.
a mapping between those two things, between groups and people, yeah, I totally agree. There's going to be this element of inclusion, um, that allows for everybody to kind of be in one unique space. So even the divisions between cultures, kind of falls away. Uh,
Mhm.
but you could also say that that kind of erases identity a little bit.
Right.
That
Right.
there's less cultural identity
Mhm.
without these languages. And but I also think that if the identity of people that are having or do have social issues will be a lot easier, because you won't be able to hide,
Right.
um, which I think is a good thing. I don't know. I mean, at least they can get help. At least they can find some sort of resource to try to bring them back into what is considered a quality group member.
Right.
You
I
know,
guess what concerns me in general about this technology, and we're talking about some, technological addition or interface to allow you to share your thoughts with others. I worry that if that power exists, it's going to be used, and like with everything, there's a chance that it can be used for bad reasons, for bad actors who use that information and can shift the way things happen. And again, I'm limited by the way I'm thinking of our current language. That if I could, for example, read your thoughts about what you're going to do today, I could figure out ways to take advantage of that for my own gain. And in the future, maybe if the whole culture shifts to sharing and being more connected, that can be possible. But as the technology develops and we're still in our current phase, I think there are going to be some problems with allowing others access to basically your brain.
yeah, and I think that that's the difference, because right now what we've been talking about is output.
Hmm.
And once you and with any output, there's also the possibility of input.
Right.
And this is now neural hacking. People don't know why they're doing what they're doing. It's that could be very problematic because you could get basically an army of people that don't understand why they are doing the things they're doing because they're
Right.
being influenced, but they're still
Mhm.
doing it as if they thought it was their own idea.
Right, which is extremely terrifying. And I mean,
Yeah.
even in the less terrifying example of, marketers, if you find out, okay, if I do these things, this person will go buy go buy this product. If just knowing that changes, and the scary part, as you said, is that people think it's their own idea. And the more
Oh,
you can implant this idea or this thought or this trigger to make them do a certain thing, and they still think it's their own idea, it's almost like there's a problem or a kind of like a virus that you can't detect that's controlling you, but you can't detect it.
yeah, no. It's been also represented in certain media that I can think of.
Hmm.
There's a great scene in Ghost in the Shell, which is an anime where this guy
Hmm.
basically gets hacked and he thinks he has a wife and a dog and
Hmm.
or I think he does have a dog, but he thinks he has a whole family.
Right.
And he's showing a picture to the police, like, sorry, the camera's here, showing a
Hmm.
picture to the police, and he's like, look at my family, and they're like, they're it's just you and your dog, it's like
Right.
there's no family in that picture. But the
Hmm.
way he was seeing it, and they had to completely decompress his image of what he thought was going on,
Hmm.
and he was being used by a bigger organization or terrorist cell in order
Hmm.
to could do whatever they needed him to do, and he
Right.
thought he was doing what he always did.
Hmm.
His whole identity was basically made up and he had no idea.
And we're back. Just proof that we're real humans and not AI or robots. We will have technical issues, but hopefully we'll push through and figure it out. So I think, Cody, we were talking about some of the negative effects of being able to express what's your deepest interior thoughts. Some of the risks include, other people getting into that, other people controlling that, and some of the risks involved with that.
Yeah, and I think the last thing I mentioned was Ghost in the Shell. There's actually another movie called Gamer, which I really enjoyed,
Hmm.
where it doesn't exactly touch on this, but it is part of the end part of the movie where he's basically using this same influence, and people will go in, and their job is to be NPCs in these
Hmm.
experiences, and while they're NPCs, their entire um, actually, no, they're not even NPCs, they're avatars. So
Hmm.
someone else can take over their bodies and use them in these places and do whatever they want in that body and feel the things they feel and everything. And they go, this is like a job for them. They go to work. And in the end, like, it's his expansion of this kind of universe allows him to become a dictator, or it is implied that the leader of this company that is doing this is going to try to become a dictator.
Right.
Um, Very scary stuff, man. And it's
Yeah.
funny that's like I truly believe that media is our window into these possible futures that
Hmm.
we need to look out for.
No, I was had that thought recently, and not to take too much of a tangent, but you look back at some of the science fiction stuff, and 30, 40 years ago, it just seemed outlandish and like, oh, that's funny. These guys are coming up with outrageous things for the future. But then you see more and more of these things actually happen. Maybe not in the exact way they said, but in some form. And I think science fiction is just our best guesses of what might happen. And I think instead of just looking at it as some fanciful story, we should look at it as maybe we should take some caution before we jump into these technologies, or at least develop the safeguards at the same time we're bringing these online. Because I like the idea of being able to communicate with someone in Cambodia without knowing their language. But I also don't love the idea that the same technology could be used to figure out what each of us is thinking without our consent.
Yeah, I don't know if you can safeguard against it too much because as we're seeing with artificial intelligence right now and large language models, which we talk about every episode, but
Mhm.
very relevant.
Mhm.
It is impossible to stop the train. Like
Yeah.
there have been attempts already, to try to stop that train because of the alignment issue, where they don't believe that the artificial intelligence will be aligned with human ideals.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, I don't think that we're going to be able to take caution. I think it's just going to happen, and maybe, people need to start to take these scenarios and fund research that might now, before it happens, because we have to be a little bit more, considering 10 years down the line, 20 years down the line, what should we start now so that we don't run into the same problem as large language models where we're just starting. I mean, there has been alignment research for a while, but it's way behind the research that's gone into, actual implementation and use of the product.
Hmm.
Maybe that's the lesson we're going to continually learn over the generations, that we need to start to front load our research to protect ourselves.
Yeah, it's kind of one of those things that history has taught us that many times, but the excitement of the current day and the future, it kind of overshadows that. And we think this will be different. We can handle this one, or this will help us out enough that we don't need to create these safeguards, or we don't need to plan for it. And I think it's also the fact that, and both of us have said this before, where we're hopeful that as AI and other technologies develop, the solutions for the problems they create will be built in. They will come also at the same time.
Yeah, but specifically for this issue and like this idea of prediction of the future, I mean, if you get now AI that's developing all film media, that it one, it might cloud the visualization of what actually is happening because of their ability to non-emotionally create subject matter that might be outside of the realm. Because I do think that the reason why we're seeing a lot of accurate future predictions inside of media and inside of science fiction is because I think that there is a compelling element of being closely aligned with what is believable in the
Hmm.
future. As humans, like we enjoy seeing something that kind of scares us because, oh my gosh, that could happen. AI doesn't have that emotional effect, but maybe it will copy that emotional effect, but it also can just totally disregard it. So I think that there's going to be a lot more coming out that might not, it might cloudy that visionary element of media, but it still will increase it. So I don't know. It's very interesting.
Yeah, and one of the things that I wanted to bring up before that is just jumping to mind right now is the volume of information that is going to just overcome us is kind of frightening for me, because we're talking about, you know, we both speak English, and there's a lot of information available to us in English, and there's pretty easy translations to English. But there's still plenty of languages and plenty of ideas, plenty of concepts, movies, all sorts of media that are in languages that are inaccessible to us right now. But if you all of a sudden allow us and everyone else in the world to access all of the world's information, truly access it, and to not just see it and hear it, but to feel it, I don't know that we're ready to take in all that information and even just to sift through for the stuff that's actually valuable or actually useful. I don't know how we're not ready for that.
I mean, there are actually two more examples. I know this is at the end of the episode, but there's two more
Mhm.
examples that we didn't even touch upon. There the next Ready Player Two, which is a
Mhm.
book. It's never been made into a movie, but really good book. And I think I've referenced it before. But in that book, they have neural interfaces, and the way they use it is to be able to relive other people's experiences. And this has been in other movies
Mhm.
before. I forget it's not, it's Spinal Tap. It's like something like that, where they, anyways, you can relive other people's memories, and there's a network of, so this is basically the future of YouTube.
Mhm.
And if we are able to take the visual representation in our brain, put someone else's visual representation in our own brains and their
Mhm.
emotional feelings, now that becomes the future of media, which is crazy. It's
Mhm.
crazy to think that that's where we're going to head. Um, but now I can't remember what the second one
Right,
was.
the volume of information that we'll have to sift through.
Yeah, yeah. No, I
Yeah.
mean, it's going to be a lot. It's going to be a
Yeah.
lot, and I think it will interconnect us in some way that I, I feel like the whole system's kind of is a redefinition and a re-efficientizing, which isn't a word, but of the ability to connect us all as human beings. So like we'll be way more connected if we can, if everybody can go on stage as Taylor Swift. I don't know why I chose her, but if everybody can go on stage and feel what she feels in those moments, it kind of, because that is a very unique part of life that not everybody's going to have access to, that may have taught her lessons and realizations of who she is. I mean, humans themselves will start to change because now instead of there's only certain people that can access certain pieces of, evolution that, personal evolution, by experience,
Hmm.
now everybody can access it. Everybody has the access to the same data set. So what does that even mean? Like we're almost all gaining, like, what does it mean to go, fight in wars? Like,
Right.
if you really wanted to track that and feel what it means, that, I mean, obviously your life isn't at risk, but I suppose you could,
Yeah,
I don't
and that brings to mind something else. Like this is the same. I if there were podcasts when the movable type and books were just coming out and being made available to everyone, I have a feeling they would be saying the same thing. Like, what are we going to do? Like right now, it's with the governments and religious leaders and people with money, all the books. But now it's going to go to everyone. Think of all the problems that'll create. Think of all the information that'll be there. But there are obviously benefits that came from people having access to books. But after a certain point, people just accept that it's there, and there's so much knowledge in books, and, tons of sources over the internet that people aren't accessing. Obviously, there are people who do, but I don't think it's going to sweep across and every single person is going to have a better life because of this. I think a lot of times they'll take the experience, the fun aspect of it, but if we're using your Taylor Swift example, I don't think it's going to simulate all of the hours she spent training or rehearsing or going through all the work because people, quite frankly, don't want to put up with that. They just want to get to the end result.
Oh no, of course, but I think by mapping the emotional feelings of that person, so and just their presence in that moment so
Hmm.
accurately, and I said that you wouldn't know, that if you went to war, it might not be the same because you might not, you know that you're not going to die, but if you're perfectly mapped to that individual that was there,
Right.
you know now what it means to risk your life for a cause, which is
Hmm.
something that I don't think most people are able to connect with, but now everybody will be able to connect with that. Every and there's all sorts of other benefits that I see, like for political leaders, they won't be able to hide anything because their emotional intent will be scrutinized.
That's true.
uh
And
I-
even from the aspect of, you know, understanding just in a base level, like understanding why a person is the way they are or what challenges they have, or what it feels like to walk into a room of people who are different than them. Not everyone has that ability or that experience in their own life, but if you could all of a sudden put on a headset or, start a program, and then you're experiencing life as someone growing up in China who comes to the United States for the first time. And that may be an opportunity that a limited number of people have that you can all of a sudden open up to anyone who wants to participate.
yeah, and the other example I remembered it is
Mhm.
the Matrix, which is the downloading of information into your brain at high capacities. So
Mhm.
now, if that becomes a reality, and we're able to create the neural pathways that of an expert, or it also changes that completely. Like now, there is no, every human is basically on the same playing field. There's nothing special about anybody, but we're all special, we're all enhanced. Like it's gonna be really interesting. Like it just
Yeah.
kind of blows my mind if we are aligning ourselves with what all of these different predictions in media are showing us.
Mhm.
It's crazy. Like it's gonna be, again, just a crazy, crazy world.
And you're talking about just delivering, for example, the, Battlefront footage. You're saying delivering that as is to a person. But then I worry, what if someone tweaks it and makes it seem like a better or worse experience than it actually is? And then if you have people adjusting, the more we believe something is honest and real and actually happened, the more risky it is that someone could tweak that for their own benefit. And we've already seen the problems with misinformation. We've talked about it on previous episodes, but that only gets worse the more people believe something is factual and real.
Yeah. No, I agree. And for the example of making sure the emotional intent of
Mhm.
the present, yeah, that can all be doctored. I mean, I suppose anything that is transferred to you, because if it's mapped in a certain way, you can map it in any way you want.
Hmm.
Also, I mean, overloading of the of the brain, you
Right.
could just overload it. I don't know. I mean, maybe it becomes such a. I mean, because you can. There are signals you can send to computers and there's not so much anymore. But there were times where you could send a program that would fire off the same, transistors over and over again, overheat something,
Hmm.
blow the computer, and this has obviously happened enough so it's protected against now, but no reason you can't do that, make people insane, fry parts of their brains.
Right. I mean, it's not to the same extent, but even when we're talking about all the additional levels of communication, and now you don't just need to know letters and words and sentences, you have to also know memes and GIFs and all sorts of additional things to communicate. Obviously, I think most people can deal with that now, but as that keeps going up, and you have more acronyms to remember, more references and more context clues, all of that can get overwhelming. And I think we're already seeing that in terms of people's mental health and how they deal with social media. There's a lot of impact, and it's a lot of change in a very condensed period of time. And if we're talking about not just having what our current inputs are, but increasing that tenfold, thousandfold, how are our brains going to keep up?
I mean, that's going to be the amazing thing is it's going to be evolution. I mean, we're talking about a type of evolution that we've never seen at a speed that we've never seen. I mean,
Hmm.
to introduce these kinds of technologies into our day-to-day process is an evolution of itself, but it will require the amount of information. I mean, the amount of stress that will be on the brain will require an evolution of strength to handle all of that. I mean,
Yeah.
I already see the evolution. I think people are smarter every generation, and you hear parents talk about this. Oh my gosh, my kids are so smart. It's
Hmm.
because they're forced to be. I mean, the system keeps becoming more dense, keeps becoming, requiring higher standards to handle, and uh, the amount of media and the amount of information is just growing.
Yeah. My concern is evolution takes millions of years, and we're condensing this to a short period of time. Also, you see those who survive evolution, the species and the animals that didn't make it, you don't get a lot of press. So I'm curious which side we'll end up on, whether we'll be the us specifically and humanity in general, whether we'll be the ones who adapt enough to keep up with this, or we fall off because we just can't.
I don't know. Yeah, I mean, and I think that the way we look at evolution and the what you're saying, it takes millions of years at one point. I think that is also probably exponentially speeding up as well. And may continue to exponentially speed up for us to keep intact with what's going on around the rest of the world. So who
Yeah.
knows? You know.
Yeah. Well,
Um,
I know for a fact as long as this communication of speech and text and video works, then we'll keep doing this podcast, and hopefully we'll evolve along with the rest of the world.
yeah, we're gonna pipe ourselves right into your brains.
Well, thanks for listening and watching, and we'll be back next week with another episode about the future.